The rifle clanged on the steel bench like an insult. Captain Jordan Pike let the big Barrett thump down in front of Staff Sergeant Mira Kovač, as if shedding a problem onto a stranger. "Maybe the intel girl can make this diva eat from a spoon," he said, brushing dust from his sleeves. "My shooters can't hold 0 past 700 with it. Shots right high, then low, then they just quit." Mira didn't argue. She pulled a rag across the receiver, checking the bolt face with a loop. The extractor claw showed a glassy chip at the corner, just enough to slip on a heat-swollen case. The recoil lug had been torqued by someone who treated snug as a measurement. Afghan talc had cribbed itself into places where oil turned to gum. She breathed out slow. "Your diva's not the problem," she said softly. "Neglected instruments sing out of tune." Pike smirked. "Let me guess, music school?" "Carpentry," she replied, and popped the action open. "My grandfather's shop. He taught me that wood moves with weather. Steel does too." Master Sergeant Luis Ortega watched from the doorway, arms crossed, saying nothing. He knew better than to step on a pride parade until it finished marching. Mira replaced springs she carried in an Altoids tin, stoned the claw, reset the lug torque, drew a grease pencil line across the optics base to show if screws walked. She dry-cycled 10 times, listening with her fingertips for the sound of a problem. When she finished, Pike reached for the rifle, but Ortega held him off with 2 fingers. "Let her test it," the sergeant said, "or we can keep praying to Saint Malfunction." Mira nodded once. She closed the case, slung it, and walked toward the door without another word. Outside, the afternoon wind came off the mountains with a whisper like a saw through pine. Somewhere in Khyber province, a ridgeline was waiting to teach humility, one way or the other. They called her an analyst because paperwork needed a place to live. On the roster at Forward Operating Base Asadabad, SSG Mira Kovač appeared under signals exploitation, tasked with pattern-of-life assessments and target packet maturation. It made people comfortable to believe the woman with the tidy bun spent nights coaxing secrets from radio chatter instead of glassing valley walls through a 5.25x scope. Comfort was a fragile thing out here. Command preferred fragile lies to durable truths. Mira was 29, 5'5" in boots, a line of faint scars across her knuckles from chisels and cold winters. She'd grown up above her grandfather's shop in Idaho Falls. He'd been a ski patrolman and a bench-press competitor, a man who believed the mountain taught everything worth knowing if you stopped talking long enough to hear it. She learned to read wind from snow ghosts that curled off fence posts, to feel humidity in her teeth, to count the invisible ladders the sun built between sagebrush and sky. At 19, she joined the Army to do something that wasn't repairing stair treads or replacing window mullions. On a range in Kansas, she shot a string of 10s in a crosswind that made flags fight like cats. Instructors started asking for her inputs before they gave their own. A detachment that didn't officially exist invited her to observe an evaluation. She stayed 5 days, and the rumor afterward, with no name attached, was that somebody there had clicked through a 1,000-yard drill like it was a picnic table game. Then came a cover story. The tidy job. The cable traffic that conveniently aligned with long nights when helicopters ghosted out and returned light by 2 men. She'd stand under the rotors, hair whipped loose from its tie, and carry the rifle case past anyone who didn't want to admit they'd seen it. Analyst. Pike had said earlier, skimming her file, "We'll keep you safe behind the glass." "Behind the glass," she'd answered. "You can see the weather coming." That's all. Ortega had lifted his eyebrows. He'd been at Asadabad 3 rotations. He knew better than to argue with the horizon. The whiteboard showed a narrow valley flanked by broken shale. Red X's marked caches that weren't there anymore. Blue chevrons showed an ODA approach route from the south, climbing a spur to Overwatch a junction where fighters liked to tax villagers at gunpoint. Pike tapped the board with a marker. Positions Echo and Foxtrot. Clean angles. We're done by dawn. Mira raised a hand. "Sir, the notch between these spurs hides a dry wadi. At 400 meters, you lose eyes on the east trail. If they move in shadow, you'll only hear them when they're under you." Pike exhaled through his nose. "This again." Ortega stepped in. "We could push a camera to the culvert where it opens. Low power link back to TOC. Or we could trust trained shooters to hold trained sectors, Pike said. With respect, Master Sergeant. The room tasted of stale coffee and the kind of silence that carries a dare. The JTAC, Staff Sergeant Shaw, looked down at his tablet as if its map might open and swallow him. The Terp, Farid, traced the valley shape with one finger like a prayer. Sir, Mira said, steady. Wind here shunts at night. North face gets a downslope from the snowfield, picks up speed in the notch. Mirage will lie to you. A shooter in Echo will see water where there's none and heat where there's shade. Foxtrot's fine. Echo needs height or it needs eyes at the culvert. That's all I'm saying. Pike capped the marker. Noted. We launch at 0300. Ortega, make sure our guns run. I'm done hearing about Diva rifles. On our way out, Ortega paused by Mira. Can you actually get a camera to that culvert without being seen? She smiled without showing teeth. I can get a piano there if you give me an hour. 30 minutes, he said. And not a piano. Darkness in Kjønner isn't black. It's indigo and grain, the world reduced to texture and breath. Mira left the wire at 0200 with a pack that didn't exist on any sign-out sheet, a collapsible mast, and a camera the size of her palm. She moved along the irrigation line, boots kissing the earth, counting steps the way carpenters count nail heads. At the culvert, she found goat hair snagged on rusted mesh. She clipped it away, slid the camera against a concrete mouth, and aimed it so the wadi's floor was a throat that would cough if anyone tried to slip through. On the climb back, she saw the valley begin to change color, not from dawn, but from the way cold and stone rewrite starlight. She checked the small anemometer clipped to her sling, 8 to 10 knots, rolling down the north face. A full value push from left to right for anyone facing east. She tasted metal under her tongue and filed it as a promise. At 0305, helicopters moved air without sound, the way shadows move a room when a cloud crosses the moon. ODA 3124 dropped on the south spur and ghosted into position. Pike whispered checks. Shaw breathed K-frequencies like a lullaby. Farid's voice barely lived in the net. Mira stood on the TOC tower with a Barrett and her own rifle. MRAD in .338 Lapua with a Night Force Attiker neatly torqued, a kestrel lanyard to the stock like a talisman. She had chalk marks on the rail, white scars that told her which screws told the truth. Ortega joined her with a mug that might once have known coffee. You're not cleared as Overwatch, he said. It was not a reprimand. It was we both know how this works. I'm cleared to monitor feeds, she answered, eyes on the culvert live image, and to report irregularities. What are you calling irregular tonight? Anything that tries to make our people less alive, she said, and shouldered into the glass. At 0341, the camera blinked once, a pixie wink. Then figures slipped through the throat like ink poured into water. They moved low and quiet, trained the way necessity trains you, brutally, without romance. The first 3 carried PCAMs broken down, barrels slung like shepherd staffs. Another led by a thin dog that wore its hunger like a medal. Movement, culvert, Mira said. 5+. East trail. Window in the dead space. They're patient. Pike came on net, breath a shade too fast. Echo, I have nothing. Foxtrot, posture. Echo, Mira said, you have mirage that isn't mirage. Their heat signature is hugging the ground. Your angle will subtract them from the world unless they stand up to shoot. Analyst, Pike said, a warning wrapped around a word. Keep talking, Ortega told her quietly. You've got it. The fighters opened like hands, each to a knuckle of rock. A mortar tube appeared and knelt. 2 RPG gunners found backstops. The dog lay down, ears flat. Shaw, Mira said, you have jammer south. You'll lose link if they key up. You won't get steel for 10 minutes and rotors for 20. You have rifles and a ridge. That's the math. Shaw's voice was calm. Copy. I'll make the math like me. Echo, she continued. If you can't see them, you can hear them. On my mark, shift 5 mils, right of last known. 2 clicks up. Trust the wind I'm giving you. There was the smallest pause, the pause soldiers take when someone they didn't expect to believe asks for belief anyway. Copy, a different voice said from Echo. Sergeant Halloran, the team's marksman. Say the wind. 8 to 10, full value, stepping, Mira answered. Hold point 7 right at 700. At 9, hold 1. On you, Halloran said. They waited together, invisibly. The first PCAM coughed dust. Mark, Mira said. Echo cracked. Something heavy tumbled in the dead space. A shape trying to be two shapes and failing. The mortar team rushed to adjust. Foxtrot broke with controlled, paired thunder, and the notch began to give up its secrets. Then the Barrett on the tower hiccuped, tried to tear a spent case and failed. The extractor claw, even stoned and kissed back to life, hadn't forgiven heat. Don't touch it, Mira told Ortega, who had moved toward the gun. She shouldered the MRAD, her rifle, the one with the rail marks that were also a diary. We don't have time to fix someone else's story. The valley through 25X is a cathedral of small physics. Mirage leaned like grass. The downslope wind braided itself into chords. Mira built her first hold not from the Kestrel's numbers, but from how the dust lifted where a runner's heel struck stone. Target 1, PCAM assistant, 872, she murmured. 0.9 right, 2.2 up. She exhaled. Her trigger press felt like setting a chisel and tapping once clean. The man folded before his weapon understood it had been abandoned. Echo, your left, she called. Moving pair. One with tube. Halloran took the right, beat her shot by half a heartbeat. 2 up on the ridge. Return fire came in sheets. The first rounds cracked past the TOC, snapping air like knotted towels. Tracers stitched where they imagined she might be. Mira didn't flinch. Flinching cuts angles, and angles are how you pay rent out here. Farid, Pike said on the net, voice narrowed by adrenaline. Tell villagers to stay down. Already told them yesterday, Farid answered. Today, I tell the river. Mira settled into the rhythm carpenters know. Measure twice, cut once, then measure again, because wood is treacherous, and so is wind. She cleaned the mortar man at 1,129 by holding .3 light to lull the round into a drop she'd already decided on. She put a bullet through a PCAM receiver when they took cover behind it, the way you sand through paint to find oak. Shaw, she said, you have smoke? 2 WP, he replied. You want a curtain? In 60 seconds, she answered. Let me move them first. From the notch, a muzzle flash blinked in a place that had no good reason to be hot. Counter sniper. Found you, she whispered. She didn't shoot yet. She watched for a second blink, the way you barely move a plane across a board until light finds a high spots. When it came, she marked distance, 1,376, dialed 4.2, held 1.1 right, and waited for the wind to stop lying. Now, she said and took the shot. The return never came. Curtain, she added, and Shaw sent smoke to baffle the enemy's economy of angles. It boiled white, then gray, then became a wall that hid a withdrawal Pike hadn't wanted to brief. All stations, Pike said tightly, shift to LZ Bravo. We're moving. Hold for 1, Mira said, eyes still in glass. 2 fighters broke north along a goat track to flank the new path. Halloran, I've got left. Take right. On, he said. They took them like carving dovetails. 1, then the mirror image fitting edges, so clean you didn't need glue to know they'd hold. The counter sniper wasn't alone. A second shimmer winked far left, coy and patient. This one knew the game. He didn't blink at the same spot twice. He blinked at echoes. He was reading her reading him. Ortega, she said, keeping her eye on the scope. I'm off the tower. You've got a good perch, he said. I've got a predictable perch, she corrected. He just wrote my address on his hand. She slung the MRAD and went down the ladder on soft feet, moving along the shadow line of the outer berm. The TOC wall hid her from the ridge's direct line. She slipped into the drained irrigation ditch, 8 inches of stale water and all the privacy in the world, and belly crawled until a rise of earth made a new rest. From here, the angles changed. The new line put a thorn tree in front of the counter-sniper's hide, just enough to break his rhythm. She checked range, 1,514 now, a long truth even on a calm day, and breathed until her heartbeat moved from her shoulder to the ground. He fired. The round chewed dirt a hand-width from where her head had been 20 seconds before. He was good. He'd read the tower and imagined her staying stubborn. "Halloran," she whispered, "count to 8, then splash a shot at 1,500 left of the thorn. Don't hit him. Turn his head." "Copy," he said and did. At the 7th count, she saw the tiniest betrayal, a ripple of heat where his spotter glass had shifted. She took that, not him. Glass breaks evenly. Eyes panic. She saw the flash of movement when his spotter flinched, then the shooter's barrel lifted in reflex. That reflex made a silhouette. The thorn tree shuddered with a sound like dry applause. "Off the board," she said, not to anyone, and rolled her cheek off the stock. On net, Pike's breathing had evened. "Shaw status. 2 walking wounded, 1 litter," Shaw replied. "Birds 6 minutes. We can make Bravo if we don't grow new holes." "You won't," Mira said. "You're clear for 90 seconds. Move." Ortega's voice was quiet in her ear. "How many?" "Enough," she said, and didn't count out loud. The fragile part of any plan is the last 40 yards. You can orchestrate perfect shots across a mile, and then trip on a route you didn't see because you were busy being a legend. Mira kept her eye out not for fighters, but for the weird, stupid things that kill people. The hole under grass, the loose shale waiting to roll a man's ankle at the exact second a helicopter's rotor washed a man's balance. "Foxtrot, slopes ugly at your 1 o'clock," she called. "Step where the weeds bend downhill. They're telling you where the rock is solid." "Copy," someone panted. "Copy your botany." Shaw popped smoke short to make the LZ look like a mistake. The pilots, who were artists, took the gag and sold it. They feathered in on a false approach, then slid the true bird into the pocket while the ridge kept guessing. A runner broke from the east with a tube on his shoulder and a prayer in his mouth. Mira had a bad angle. The berm that saved her from the counter-sniper now took the shot she wanted. Halloran had a window, but his barrel would silhouette if he stood. "Ortega," she said, "I'm tossing the mast." She yanked the collapsible pole from her pack like a magician, pulling a ladder from a hat, and snapped it vertical at the berm's crest. A decoy silhouette in a helmet climbed into the sky where a head shouldn't be. The runner flinched, swung, and all the angles in his world collapsed into that one wrong target. Mira shot him through the decision. "Birds too," Shaw called. Rotor noise rolled through the valley like a low tide finally coming in. The first helicopter kissed Earth and inhaled men. "Halloran," Mira said, "save your last mag. I've got chase." She walked the ridge with 4 shots like a metronome. Left rock, right crease, dust ghost, silence. Then she lifted off the scope, told her body the long part was done, and used her hands not for killing, but for the gentle work of closing latches, stowing kit, returning herself to something that could pass as a human being when the world demanded paperwork. The second helicopter departed into a sky pinking at the seam. The valley exhaled, and for a moment all you could hear was the wind discovering it had no more work to do. 6 hours later, the TOC smelled like burned dust and cheap coffee again. Mira wiped her rifle down on a mat stained with a history of days like this. The door opened and Pike stood there, face a sunburn map. He didn't speak at first. He reached into a pocket and drew out a coin heavy enough to be taken seriously. ODA 3124 on one side, a mountain and a motto on the other. He held it out. His hand had a tremor like a plucked string that was finally letting go. "Staff Sergeant," he said. The rank sounded like an apology that didn't humiliate either of them. "I was wrong about the glass. Glass tells the truth if you listen," she said. "So do people." He nodded, eyes on the rifle. "How many?" "Enough," she repeated. "I stopped counting after it stopped matching." Ortega leaned in the doorframe, the other half of a smile hiding in his beard. "Command wants your file," he said. And by wants, I mean someone at Bragg saw a write-up with the words anonymous technical support and improbable engagement next to numbers that don't make sense unless the world is bigger than the paperwork. Mira screwed the cap on her oil pan. "Am I getting fired from signals?" "You're getting kidnapped by shooters," Ortega said. "Special Operations Target Interdiction Course wants a new cadre. Someone to teach wind to people who only believe numbers. Someone to teach angles to people who only trust straight lines." Pike cleared his throat. If they let me sit in the back of your first class, I won't talk. I'll just take notes. You won't have to say anything, she replied. The mountain will do the talking. He closed her hand over the coin. For what it's worth, he said, this is from all of us. Not because you saved our lives, though you did. Because you made me listen to the horizon again. In the weeks that followed, the legend didn't travel the way bragging travels. It didn't bloom on social media or in bars. It moved the way technique moves, from a range tower to a student's notebook, from a lesson plan to a day on a windy hill when someone realized the kestrel was a choir, not a soloist. Mira's first class at Sodix started with a plank and a plane. She set the plank on 2 blocks and slid the plane across at once. If you don't know where the high spots are, she told a room of men and 2 women who had crossed oceans to be here, the tool will lie. Not because it hates you, because you didn't ask a precise question. She had them red smoke. She had them measure how heat wobbled above gravel at 10 o'clock versus 2, how a flag can say south while grass says west, and the truth is a diagonally walking dog. She taught them not to overtrust math or romance. She taught them a wind call for 900 yards that was also a way to forgive yourself for the last miss. The rumor about the day at Asadabad stayed rumor. The after-action remained polite fiction. Unnamed analytical element provided emergency precision support, enabling successful exfiltration. The paperwork never learned her name. The people did. On a cold morning in North Carolina, Captain Pike, on leave, sat on the berm and listened. He watched students learn to love the long work. Not the bang, but the breaths between. When Mira paused near him, he lifted a thermos like a salute. Found your horizon, he said. She looked out at the targets blinking steel 1,000 yards away and at the weather that would lie to them all day without malice. She closed her hand around the coin in her pocket and let its weight remind her of the valley, the smoke, the mast rising like a foolish head to save real ones, the counter-sniper who blinked in a way that taught everyone present about patience. Precision owes no apology, she said softly. The wind shifted. Somewhere past the berm, a student made a clean correction and found center. The sound came late, sweet and honest, a truth that needed no witness and got one anyway.